Now, let's try to imagine something extraordinary. Let's try to imagine a society without heart disease, where someone who's 80 years old has the same blood pressure as someone who's 20, where there's no heart attacks and no strokes. What would that look like, such a society? Would it be a futuristic society where all the people have robots and flying cars, advanced medical technology such as nanomedicine and gene therapy? This is starting to sound like a science fiction novel, isn't it? But it's not. Say hello to the Kuna Indians who live off of the Caribbean coast of Panama. These indigenous people are one of the few populations on Earth that do not have hypertension. And on the Kuna Islands, cardiovascular disease is almost non-existent. And as a nice bonus, these guys also have a much lower incidence of cancer and heart disease. Pretty awesome stuff, right? This begs the question, though. What is the reason and the cause behind this? A, is it their genetics? As we just got an awesome TED presentation that genetics can play a large role. Is it B, their indigenous diet? Okay. Is it C, their stress-free Indian lifestyle? Who thinks it's A? Who thinks it's B? Raise your hands. Who thinks it's C? Well, the answer is B, which even surprised Harvard researchers. But what is it precisely in the Kuna diet that causes all of these awesome results? Well, believe it or not, but it's cocoa. The Kuna consume up to 5 cups of natural cocoa a day, which is the highest natural cocoa intake of any population on Earth. Although the consumption of natural cocoa is rare in our modern-day society, the Kuna are certainly not the first population to have felt cocoa's curative properties, as cocoa has a long and celebrated medical history. Theobroma cocoa, which is the scientific name for the cocoa tree, which is derived from Greek, literally means cocoa, food of the gods. And with good reason, as it has been a long celebrated history by Mesoamerican and South American Indians for its curative properties. It was seen as a gift from the gods themselves and was treated as a divine elixir. Only high-ranking men in these Indian communities had the honor to drink cocoa, such as high priests, generals, and nobility. The only exception to this rule was if you were a human sacrifice, a sacrifice to the gods themselves. You had the honor of drinking your first and only cup of cocoa right before they killed you. Obviously, cocoa doesn't have any long-lasting health benefits in this context, but hey, it's pretty good. And the Mayans went so far in their glorification of cocoa that they had their own cocoa god. This handsome guy right here is called Ixchahua. I'm probably saying that wrong, but hey, I can't speak Mayan. And they honored Ixchahua each year in a lavish festival with sacrifices and gifts because they saw cocoa as a truly divine elixir. During the conquest of the New World, the Spanish conquistadors quickly noticed cocoa's curative properties and as such saw its value as a trade product. It was subsequently exported to Europe, where it quickly became a favorite treat amongst the wealthy classes. Between the 16th and 20th century, no less than 100 medical uses were described for cocoa. The natural cocoa I've discussed in the previous slides, in which the Kuna drink in such large quantities, is quite bitter, and quite frankly, I've tried it, it tastes really bad. During the 19th century, we invented the processes to make what we now know as the modern-day version of chocolate, the stuff you buy in the supermarkets. Sadly, these very processes destroy much of cocoa's curative properties, and because of this, doctors soon forgot about cocoa as a medicine. It wasn't until the 1990s where researchers regained their interest in cocoa. Now, what does 21st century medicine have to say about cocoa? Let's go back to the Kuna study. The most striking feature the researchers found in the Kuna study was that these Indians had an average blood pressure of 110/70, which is the medical textbook definition of a perfect blood pressure. Even at the age of 65, these people maintained that perfect blood pressure. This in itself is remarkable, as the average blood pressure for, as you can see in the chart behind me, for a person living in the United Kingdom is almost 140, as you can see from the red dotted line. That's an almost 30-point difference. At the same time, 40% of the people in the same age group will be taking antihypertensive drugs because their doctor deems their blood pressure so high that it is a threat to their health. Okay, but it gets even better than that. The Harvard researchers looked at the relative risk of dying from various diseases, and they compared the Kuna Indians living on the San Blas Islands with their mainland cousins living in Panama City. And what they found was truly extraordinary. When it comes to diabetes, people living in Panama City have an age-adjusted relative risk, higher relative risk of dying of 3.7 times. When it comes to ischemic heart disease, which is a fancy word for a heart attack, you are 5 times, if you live in Panama City, you are 5 times more likely to die of a heart attack than the Indians living on the San Blas Island. But it gets even better. If you look at cancer, people living in Panama have a more than 15 times higher chance of dying from cancer. And although this might sound too good to be true, stroke is almost non-existent on the San Blas Islands. True, this is an observational study which probably has many confounding factors, but what we do know is that cocoa plays a large role in attaining these results. And it's not just the Kuna study that says that cocoa has potentially health beneficial effects. There is a large body of research, including several dozen clinical trials, systematic reviews, meta-analyses, and even a Cochrane review that all indicate that cocoa has the following health benefits, which include a significant decrease in systolic and diastolic blood pressure, which reduces, for example, your odds of getting a stroke. A significant decrease in insulin resistance, which is quite advantageous if you have diabetes or if you like drinking lots of Coca-Cola. A significant improvement in cholesterol and lipid markers. Cholesterol is a fancy word for the stuff that clogs your arteries after you eat a pizza or a hamburger. And a significant improvement in cardiovascular function, which is great if you don't want to get a heart attack. And furthermore, cocoa, the clinical trials show that cocoa also has no significant side effects, at least in the short term. And there's a large body of historical and anecdotal evidence that indicates that cocoa is a relatively safe substance. Emperor Montezuma and his following of approximately 50 people would drink up to 2,000 cups of cocoa a day. That's probably an unhealthy dosage. But it does indicate that cocoa is a relatively safe substance. You can't say that for aspirin. Furthermore, cocoa is dirt cheap. As you can see from the drawing behind me, cocoa pods are grown in some of the poorest countries on Earth. Cocoa is harvested by some of the poorest people on Earth, and the Kuna who consume it in such large quantities are one of the most socially deprived and impoverished communities in Panama. This isn't some fancy $10,000 a month medication. This is something we can readily afford if we really want to. But why am I standing here? Why is this important? Because in 2010 alone, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, and cancer killed over 23 million people in 2010 alone. These 4 factors in aggregate, as you can see from the pie chart, account for over 44% of all deaths worldwide. And it's not just deaths and suffering. The economic toll is also huge. According to a study conducted by Harvard and the World Economic Forum, these diseases cost the world economy an aggregate of over $1.4 trillion each year. Just to illustrate that, that's the equivalent of the entire Spanish economy. That's a lot of money. And as bad as all this may sound, it's only going to get worse as global population and life expectancy increase in unison. According to this graph, which is based on United Nations projections, by 2050, more than 20% of people will be 60 years and older. which means that these chronic diseases that I mentioned will increase in the coming decades, making the burden even larger than it is today. Is cocoa a cure? Well, it can be part of a solution. Cocoa is definitely not a standalone treatment. If you have cancer, hypertension, diabetes, or heart disease, taking cocoa alone will not cure you. But as an addition to standard treatment protocols, or as a dietary recommendation for high-risk patient groups, such as people with obesity, cocoa shows large potential. Now, what could that mean in practical terms if we put it in standard treatment protocols and if we give some people cocoa? Well, let's just imagine if we can reduce the disease burden on a global scale by just 1%. Not a holy grail, not some kind of breakthrough, but just 1%. That would mean saving $14 billion each year in medical expenses, which is the equivalent of the entire Dutch budget deficit. It would mean saving over 230,000 lives each year, which is the same as all of the citizens of Groningen, plus a bonus of 40,000 people. But this doesn't just consider strangers or other people. This also is important for you, as it is a sad and horrifying fact that in a country like Holland, you or a loved one will probably struggle with one of the diseases I just mentioned. And as I've discussed in the previous slides, cocoa has a rich medical history. 21st century research shows that it has potentially large effects on human health. It has little to no known side effects. And lastly, it is dirt cheap. Therefore, cocoa has the potential to improve the quality of lives of millions of people who suffer each and every day from these horrendous diseases. And that is a goal worth pursuing. That's why we should start taking cocoa's medical potential seriously, for it is truly a gift from the gods. Thank you for your attention, and yeah, let's make a difference.